Last week, Amanda, my stepsister, unexpectedly made an appearance at my wedding. She arrived uninvited, bringing along a child who was a neighbor's son, a kid I had never met before. Amanda, who is 26 years old, and I, at 27, have never shared a harmonious relationship. In fact, our interactions ceased the moment we both left for college. Our strained relationship began in middle school when my mother married Amanda's father. From that point on, Amanda became a constant source of frustration and annoyance in my life. When my father divorced my mother during my early childhood, he largely disappeared from our lives. However, Amanda's experience was different. Her parents had divorced just a few years before my stepfather married my mother. Amanda resented my mother, mistakenly believing that my mother was interfering with her parents' already dissolved relationship. Despite her parents' separation occurring long before my mother entered their lives, Amanda harbored a deep dislike not only for my mother but also for me. She made a conscious effort to be as unpleasant and antagonistic towards me as possible. Our parents attempted to mediate and encourage us to get along, but they eventually abandoned these efforts after realizing that Amanda had no intention of being nice. Throughout our childhood, Amanda was a constant irritant, and when I moved out for college, I was mostly relieved to escape living in the same household as her. We would inevitably cross paths during holidays or birthdays, but we intentionally avoided meaningful conversations, and this arrangement worked for both of us. About a year ago, there was an incident where my mother reached out to me asking if I was comfortable with her using some leftover money from my college fund. At that time, I had secured a scholarship, so I didn't need to deplete my college savings. Additionally, there was some money set aside for my wedding. My mother wanted to use these funds to help pay for Amanda's wedding expenses. I was unaware that Amanda was even engaged or had a fiancé, as we hadn't communicated in a long time. Knowing the importance of saving for my future, I declined her request. My mother didn't press the matter further, she simply stated that was all she needed to know and ended the call. We never revisited the topic, and it slipped my mind until recently. I recently discovered that Amanda had to cancel her wedding plans because her father refused to fund the extravagant and overly expensive event she had envisioned. She had expected both our parents to cover all costs, from the venue to her wedding dress. Although her father had some savings set aside, Amanda's lavish demands exceeded his budget, threatening to deplete his savings entirely. Consequently, he declined her requests, and Amanda then turned to my mother for financial support. Since her own mother claimed to have no money to contribute, my mother had to consider using funds reserved for my wedding. However, she was hesitant to do so without my approval. When I informed her that I was not comfortable with using my wedding savings, my mother also refused to contribute. As a result, Amanda and her fiancé, along with his family, couldn't afford the wedding on their own, leading them to call off the plans. Another reason my stepfather and mother declined to fund Amanda's wedding was that she and her fiancé had been together for less than a year before getting engaged. He doubted the longevity of their relationship and didn't want to invest a significant amount of money into a wedding for a union that might not last. Indeed, a few months after their engagement, her fiancé left her following a minor disagreement, which left Amanda deeply upset with our parents. She believed that if our parents had financed the wedding, the marriage might not have ended so abruptly. Although she remained financially dependent on our parents, she continued to hold a grudge, clearly expressing her displeasure with them. A few months ago, I became engaged to my boyfriend of nearly 6 years. When I shared the news with my parents, they offered to cover the wedding expenses. However, my fiancé and I preferred a simple, intimate ceremony without unnecessary extravagance. We wanted to save the funds for our future together. My mother transferred all the money from my wedding fund to me, including the remaining portion from my college fund. Additionally, my stepfather sent me around $10,000. They assured us that we could use the money however we wished and would have no objections even if we opted for a grand wedding. Nevertheless, my husband and I remained committed to having a small wedding. In an attempt to express my gratitude, I made a Facebook post a few weeks ago thanking everyone who had contributed to the wedding in any capacity. Naturally, I thanked my parents for their emotional and financial support, specifically mentioning both my mother and stepfather, as I consider them my true parents since middle school. I never saw Amanda as my sister, but I do regard my stepfather as my father. The post was heartfelt, and it received numerous comments, which is likely how Amanda noticed it. She became angry upon realizing that both our parents had supported my wedding but had previously refused to help her. At the time, she didn't take any immediate action, but her true feelings became apparent on the day of my wedding. After the ceremony concluded and we were about to serve lunch, Amanda arrived at the venue with the neighbor's child. She approached me aggressively, accusing me of stealing her dream wedding and claiming that I had taken not only her wedding but also her father's support. My husband stood by my side as she began yelling, attracting the attention of all the guests. My parents intervened, telling her to leave and threatening to call the police if she didn't. Before leaving, Amanda tried to make a final blow by alleging that the child was my secret son from a previous relationship whom I had given up for adoption years ago. Both my husband and I knew this was false, and our parents were aware of the truth as well. Despite the guests being somewhat taken aback by her accusation, my parents had to insist that she leave, while my husband and I explained that Amanda was acting out of jealousy and was fabricating lies to tarnish my reputation. Once the situation was under control, we proceeded to lunch, hoping to move past the unpleasant incident. Upon returning home, my parents and my stepfather discussed the entire ordeal, providing context to why Amanda reacted so violently. It became clear that Amanda's actions were driven by her resentment over our parents' refusal to fund her extravagant wedding. My parents felt justified in their decision, as Amanda's wedding plans were excessively expensive compared to mine. Unlike Amanda and her fiancé, my husband and I had both contributed to our wedding expenses and didn't expect our parents to bear the entire financial burden. Additionally, Amanda's short relationship duration before engagement contrasted with the long-term commitment my husband and I had, making our parents confident that investing in our wedding was a sensible decision. Despite my parents apologizing for the situation, particularly my stepfather who felt embarrassed by Amanda's behavior, we understood that they weren't to blame. The next day, my mother informed me that Amanda had taken the child from her neighbor without informing her and was now facing kidnapping charges. Amanda had called her parents in the morning, seeking financial help to bail her out and find a lawyer. I found it unbelievable that she would go to such lengths merely to humiliate me at my wedding. While I felt a twinge of sympathy, I didn't believe I owed her an apology. However, since her arrest, Amanda's friends have been rallying against me, portraying me as the antagonist. They accuse me of being the favored child, believing that our parents had always favored me and that I was the golden child. This perception feels unfair, as I have always felt our parents treated us equally, providing both Amanda and me with similar opportunities. My academic achievements, such as securing a scholarship, were solely based on my efforts, not my parents' favoritism. Furthermore, my long-term relationship with my husband contrasted with Amanda's brief engagement, demonstrating that our parents recognized the seriousness of my relationship. My stepfather has consistently stated that he would have supported Amanda's wedding if she had been reasonable, but her unrealistic demands forced him to withdraw. If Amanda had genuinely desired a wedding, she should have adjusted her expectations or contributed financially alongside her fiancé and his family. Instead, she insisted that our parents cover everything, which was untenable given the inflated budget she proposed. It's unjust for others to blame me for her predicament when she chose to act selfishly and ungratefully. Despite her friends believing otherwise, I worked diligently to become an independent woman, relying on my own efforts and not on parental favoritism. My stepfather continues to support Amanda financially, trying to reach a settlement with the mother of the child she brought to the wedding. Meanwhile, her friends persist in their unfounded accusations against me, but I've come to realize that their opinions hold no weight compared to the truth. In my second update, I reflected on the unfolding events and acknowledged that Amanda's friends were simply siding with her out of loyalty, despite knowing the truth. Initially, I felt overwhelmed by guilt, but after discussing the situation with my mother and stepfather, I understood that Amanda's actions were irrational and that I wasn't to blame. My parents advised me to disregard her friends' negative comments, which was challenging since these were people I had known for years who suddenly turned against me. However, I realized that their support was unnecessary, and it was best to accept that they had chosen sides. Instead of trying to defend myself, I decided to move forward, confident that I had done nothing wrong. Some individuals even went so far as to accuse my parents of failing Amanda, but I had already provided a balanced account of the situation, including my refusal to share funds with her. While I acknowledged that my decision to decline her financial help was selfish, it was justified given her consistent mistreatment and lack of friendship. Amanda had never attempted to build a genuine relationship with me and had always been hostile. On occasion, I retaliated with mean comments, and our parents had to reprimand both of us for our behavior. If I had been their favorite child, they wouldn't have addressed these conflicts. Regarding the wedding, I had explained the reasons behind my funding, contrasting it with Amanda's unrealistic expectations. She never made an effort to consider our parents' perspectives and instead demanded a lavish wedding without contributing financially. Her inflated budget and haste to marry someone she barely knew made our parents' refusal understandable. It's unfair to blame me for her current situation when she didn't take responsibility for her actions. Despite her friends' claims of favoritism, I had worked hard to achieve my success independently. My stepfather remains concerned about Amanda's well-being, demonstrating his continued care despite her ungrateful behavior. It's disheartening that Amanda couldn't appreciate the support our parents provided and instead chose to manipulate the situation to gain sympathy. In my third update, I shared that almost a month had passed since the events, and my husband and I had returned from our honeymoon. Upon our return, we discovered that Amanda had officially severed all ties with our family through a public social media announcement, which I didn't see immediately as I was on my honeymoon and not regularly checking my phone. This news was somewhat of a relief, though my stepfather was initially upset before eventually moving past it, as my mother explained. Amanda had visited our parents shortly after I left for our honeymoon, not to express gratitude, but to demand that they choose between supporting me or her. She presented an ultimatum, claiming that she was tired of me taking away what she believed she deserved. As I mentioned in my first update, Amanda's accusations were baseless and unfounded. She had nothing to lose, lacking any substantial achievements or contributions of her own, and yet she expected others to take responsibility for her failures. Our parents stood firm, insisting that if Amanda wanted to sever ties, they would side with me. They described Amanda as excessively entitled, spoiled, and selfish, unable to tolerate her behavior any longer. My mother refrained from engaging in a heated argument, fearing it would escalate into sheer frustration. Instead, she calmly stated that Amanda was ungrateful and had no interest in continuing her nonsensical behavior. Amanda responded by dismissing my mother's authority, claiming indifference since she wasn't her biological daughter, and then turned her ire towards my stepfather. My mother felt deeply insulted by Amanda's remarks, leading her to leave the room temporarily. When she returned, Amanda had angrily bid farewell to my stepfather and exited the house, slamming the door behind her. My mother later revealed that Amanda's departure was a result of my stepfather reinforcing the same sentiments she had expressed, making Amanda realize that both of our parents had chosen to support me over her. This confirmed that Amanda's behavior had ensured that I was seen as the favored child, a label she had earned through her consistent disrespect and manipulative actions. Throughout our upbringing, our parents had treated us equally, but Amanda's actions had forced them to take sides. Her lack of respect and genuine love for our parents was evident, as she continued to prioritize her own needs over familial bonds. Amanda had used our parents financially for years without showing any gratitude, and now that she perceived some friends as allies, she attempted to abandon our father, further severing any remaining ties. I genuinely wish Amanda the best, provided she stays away from our family and ceases to cause any more disruptions. Her departure is a relief, as her presence had been a source of constant turmoil. My parents have always been supportive, and my stepfather remains committed to ensuring Amanda's well-being, despite her ungratefulness. My husband and I are preparing to leave for our honeymoon in a couple of days, but before we depart, we plan to visit my family one last time to check on my stepfather. He is a good man who deserves better, and I want to ensure he is okay before we embark on our next adventure. Amanda's friends have ceased their baseless complaints about favoritism, realizing that their support for her was founded on falsehoods. While I regret not speaking up earlier, my social media posts have been removed, leaving me unable to clarify my side of the story publicly. Nonetheless, I recognize that this situation is far from over. Amanda is likely to resurface with more accusations, and her friends will continue to rally behind her. Unlike before, I won't remain silent this time. I intend to defend myself and hold Amanda accountable for her actions. However, having just married, I wanted to cherish the honeymoon phase without being dragged into additional drama, especially since my parents were concerned about Amanda's state of mind. Over the past month, my husband and I have returned from our honeymoon, only to find that Amanda has definitively cut ties with our family. She announced this severance publicly on social media, which I didn't see immediately as I was away and not monitoring my phone regularly. While it was somewhat relieving to know that Amanda was no longer attempting to disrupt our lives, my stepfather was initially upset but soon recovered from the news. Shortly after I left for my honeymoon, Amanda had visited our parents, not to express gratitude, but to issue an ultimatum: choose between supporting me or her. She claimed to be fed up with me taking away what she believed she deserved, echoing the sentiments I mentioned in my first update. Her accusations were entirely unfounded, as I had never taken anything from her. Instead, she had failed to create a stable life for herself despite having similar resources and support. Our parents responded firmly, stating that if Amanda insisted on cutting ties, they would support me. They characterized her as excessively entitled, spoiled, and selfish, unable to tolerate her anymore. My mother chose not to engage in a heated argument, fearing it would lead to unnecessary frustration. Instead, she calmly declared that Amanda was ungrateful and uninterested in maintaining a positive relationship. Amanda retorted by dismissing my mother's authority, claiming indifference since my mother wasn't her biological mother, and then directed her anger towards my stepfather. Feeling deeply insulted, my mother left the room briefly. When she returned, Amanda had angrily bid farewell to my stepfather and exited the house abruptly, slamming the door behind her. Upon further discussion, my mother explained that Amanda's departure was because my stepfather had reinforced the same messages, leaving Amanda to realize that both of our parents had chosen to support me over her. This solidified the notion that Amanda had ensured I was perceived as the favored child through her consistent disrespect and manipulative behavior. Throughout our childhood, our parents had treated us equally, but Amanda's actions forced them to take sides. Her lack of genuine love and respect for our parents was clear, as she continued to prioritize her own desires over maintaining familial bonds. Amanda had relied on our parents financially for years without showing any gratitude, and now, believing she had supportive friends, she attempted to abandon our father, further severing any remaining ties. Despite everything, my parents, especially my stepfather, continue to support Amanda financially, trying to ensure her well-being even though she remains ungrateful. My husband and I are preparing for our honeymoon in a few days, but before we depart, we plan to visit my family one last time to check on my stepfather's well-being. He is a good man who deserves a better relationship with his children than the one he has with Amanda, which is why I am determined to support him and ensure he is okay. Amanda's friends have ceased their baseless complaints about favoritism, understanding that their support was misguided from the start. While I regret not addressing the situation sooner with my social media posts removed, I can no longer publicly clarify my side of the story. However, I recognize that this issue isn't resolved, as Amanda will likely continue to make false accusations. Her friends will persist in supporting her, but I am prepared to defend myself and hold Amanda accountable for her actions. Despite recently getting married, I want to protect my peace and ensure that Amanda's negativity no longer impacts my life or my family's harmony. My parents have always been supportive, and my stepfather remains committed to Amanda's well-being, even though her ungratefulness is disheartening. I am determined to move forward, knowing that I have done nothing wrong and that my parents treated us fairly, providing both Amanda and me with equal opportunities. My hard work and dedication have led to my success, independent of any favoritism, and I won't allow unfounded accusations to tarnish that truth.